Cool.
Everyone experiences challenges in life, and there are going to be times when you feel like giving up. Let me share the secrets to success through adversity. Death from birth and challenged in many ways, I learned to look at life differently and found success. Life will never give you cotton candy, so stop looking for it. Join my podcast and learn the secrets of success through adversity. Stop making excuses and start taking action. I'm your host, Jordan Lavin. Welcome to All Good Things Start With You. Welcome to the podcast. Today I've got Buddy Moorehouse and Brian Kruger. These guys are in a class of their own. They're comedians, actors, writers, producers, filmmakers, and educators. What can't these guys do? Welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you both here today.
It's an honor to be here, Jordan. Thanks.
Great to be here, Jordan. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so, you and I, the three of us, go back quite about 10 years now. Yeah. You guys, we first met you when we were in discussions of our family's documentary, and it was called Speak for Yourself, Jordan Lavin Story, and that was quite an experience to go through that journey with you, and I'd love to get your take on what was it about that film. Could you tend to have a history of developing history-type films?
Go ahead, bud.
So I'm curious to what you guys thought of. What was it about that story that entices you to get involved in that?
Well, I think speaking for myself, and also I think Brian would probably agree with me. One of the things that was so remarkable about doing your story was that we came into it with not much knowledge about your world and what you had gone through. So it was an educational process for us to learn about the challenges that you faced and how you and your family decided that you were going to deal with those challenges and the adversities that you face. So I think a lot of the other films that we've done, we came into them with more of a maybe a feeling for how we thought the story was going to go from the beginning. But with your story, it wasn't that way at all. We were learning as we went along, and it was a fascinating journey to just be able to speak to all the people in your life to find out everything that we found out about it, and then to try to put it all together into a documentary.
Yeah, I agree with Bud. Mine was a little bit more personal with that, in that I wish I would have been your age and hung around with you, because you're a blast. I want to play hockey with you. All the pictures that we had of the B-roll of you growing up, I went, man, I wish I knew this kid. He had so much energy and it was so much fun. And then the hockey and sports thing on top of it. So outside of the deafness, I just thought I want to hang around with this guy. So that was kind of fun.
I like I said before, I had such an amazing experience with that, and that was kind of my first foray into I wasn't involved in the production aspect, but understanding the timelines and understanding how long things take. And one of the things that I learned in that process was being patient, because there's so many moving parts to that, and that's obviously true for all of the other features that you've done. So. Yeah. I'd like to kind of go back a little bit and talk about maybe a little bit in the beginning. You guys both started up Stunt Johnson Theater, and you guys have always had this passion for storytelling. What is, Brian, how does one go from entertaining to being a founder of a software company? So two parts to this, that part of it, but how did you guys get involved in Stunt Johnson?
Go ahead, Bud.
Well, Stunt Johnson Theater was our comedy group that we formed back in 1989. It was Brian and myself and then three other friends of ours. We all thought we were kind of funny, but we didn't know if anyone else was going to think we were very funny.
Well, we were. Bud wasn't, but
yeah, the other ones were. So we had this idea that, we were in our 20s at the time. None of us were married. We just wanted to see if the world thought we were as funny as we thought we were. So we put a very unusual act together of a lot of little short, stupid comedy skits. And our very first show was in March of 1989. We went to a comedy club in Ann Arbor and performed about a 15-minute show there. And they laughed. The audience laughed. So we're going, okay, we were hooked at that point. So we decided at that time that we were going to try to see where this went and make a go of it. So we started writing more comedy skits and doing more and more things, getting more shows and performing literally all around the country. We went to Las Vegas and Los Angeles and all over the Midwest performing. And it was just a blast. And for me, the most fun part was that I got to, be around with my best friends almost every night, making people laugh.
Yeah. And I agree with Bud. And we came from all diverse backgrounds. I was a teacher. Buddy was a newspaper editor, which comes into play in a little bit, because as we started doing that, as we got older, we did stand-up comedy for a long time and had a nice career, worked with some great people, and it was great. But it started to, we started to get older. All of our friends were married with kids, and we were still hanging around with each other like we were in the 10th grade, which was fun. Mm-hmm. But we had to become a little more responsible. So as that happened, we started to go into our different careers, and mine went from teaching into education consulting for Apple mostly. And then, and that was in the publishing area after that. And then, so I got into the publishing world from that and into software for newspapers and magazines. Buddy and I staying close the whole time. In fact, we were still doing comedy then too. And the other guys in the group were still really good friends. So, as my software business went on through about 2000 to 2010, Buddy's newspaper business was doing the same thing. But as the internet was soaking up the newspaper print business, Bud was looking for something else to do, and I was too, because I had software that supported the print industry at the time. So we're looking for things to do. So we decided to get together and do a movie, and the first one we did was called The Girl in Centerfield, which is something we're still trying to market because it's a great story. It's about the first girl to play Little League Baseball. And then, Bud, was it the next one that we did was Jordan's or the one right after that? Yeah.
No, we did about 2 or 3 more. And then
okay,
we did The Legend of Pinky Dearest.
Legend of Pinky Dearest,
another,
and then yours.
And then Jordan's film.
So when you ask about telling stories, that really comes from Bud's writing, because Bud's really been the writer. And just Buddy and I did Stunt3 Multimedia. And it was a really nice fit. Still is. It works really well because Bud's an exceptional writer. I'm not that great of a writer, but I was working on the camera side of it. And then we both liked a good story. And yours was one of them, Jordan. I mean, when we got yours, it was way different. It was our first non-sports story. Although you're an athlete, it was still a non-sports story. So getting to learn everything about your world, like Buddy said, we were astonished about a lot of things in that world. And we loved meeting everybody in your world. We must have interviewed 1,000 people for that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And you laugh about how long it takes and how much patience. We actually churn that out faster than we normally churn out anything. So it does take a long time to do a movie. But I hope that answered the question properly for you.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to add to that the challenge that we have, and it certainly came into play when we did Speak for Yourself, your film, is that you need to boil everything down into a 45-minute or 1-hour documentary. And there's so much information and so much things. You're not writing a book about it. You're doing a 1-hour documentary on it. So having to edit things down and to tell that story in such a clear, succinct fashion is one of the biggest challenges that I think that we've experienced ever since we started doing documentaries.
Yeah. Yeah. And we tend to distill things better and better every time we go along. So that's an ongoing process, really. Try to figure out how to get that into a workable documentary. But
yeah, I mean, that's the thing when you're talking about production, there's so many moving parts to it, but like you film so many different things, and then like you said, Buddy, you have to kind of go back and say, oh, I think that's gonna fit there. Then you add something in, like, oh no, that has to come out because you have to make sure the story is being told you have to understand, filter out the noise. Does the noise, I'm talking about like the different scenes, does that scene or that person actually fit into the story? And you might have to keep it or pull it out. I've been doing a lot of reading on production, especially now that I've been doing the podcast thing, and I'm learning more about what actually happens and what makes a good story. So that's what I'm getting at, is making a good story is figuring out where the noise is and where what's important to developing that theme for that story, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And when you have multiple people working on a project, you know, the biggest discussions that Brian and I have when we make a film is about what to leave out, because we'll do a great interview and then you'll do 5 great interviews or 10 great interviews. And then we start going, well, we got to get this in. We got to keep this in. Well, we got to keep this in. And then pretty soon we're up to 4 hours. So we go, okay, well, we need to start, you know, taking things out. So that's where we have really interesting discussions every time we do any project.
And that really happened in your film too. And Bud and I struggled with that because your dad was instrumental in producing that movie. And he said, hey, look, you got to interview this person and this person, and then this person and this person and this person. And we liked all of them, right? And all of them had a little different twist. It was like making Citizen Kane, in that, you know, it's telling the story about somebody else through the eyes and of somebody else.
Right.
And so we had a hard time cutting any of that because they all came from different walks and different parts of your life. But at the end of the day, you know, and I don't think, you know, in retrospect, I would like to have cut some of that back down. But who do you cut out of that? Those are fun, great people that 50 years from now, when somebody looks at that and everybody's gone, it'll be really cool, because you'll think, wow, look at all those different people had these great different stories to tell about Jordan. And it was a multifaceted gem. I thought it was cool. And so it was a little different than anything we've ever done.
Yeah.
I had a ton of fun with that. You know, I had no idea, you know, what to expect, you know, with all the stuff that we did. And, you know, back at I'm like, wow, like you said, that's really cool. We're now 10 years later, and, you know, a lot has changed in 10 years.
Yeah, you're right. So you're married. You're a father now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
You know, when I tell people with my class of Bloomfield gym, people ask me, do we have kids? I say, no, we don't have any kids. The gym clients are my kids.
That's right. Yeah.
You have a lot of
you got a bunch of them there.
But that's my bread and butter. That's what I put my time and effort into, making sure my clients are happy and safe and all of that.
Yeah. And you look terrific. We want to know what you eat, because we got older and you didn't. Somehow, I don't know what that's all about.
So let's talk about these Emmy nominations that you've received. What was it for? A couple different films, right?
Yeah, you want to take that, Bud?
Yeah, the first film that we were nominated for an Emmy for was a movie called The Legend of Pinky Dearest, which is this story about the greatest Little League baseball player of all time. His name was Art Pinky Dearest, and in 1959, he led Hamtramck, Michigan to the Little League World Series championship. And it's still the only team from Michigan and the only team from the Midwest ever to win the Little League World Series title. Brian and I were out in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, doing another documentary on the first girl ever to play Little League. And the guy we were talking to out there was telling us about this player named Pinky Dearest. He said, you guys are from Michigan, right? We said, yeah. He said, well, there's a guy there named Pinky Dearest who's the greatest Little Leaguer of all time. And nobody knows what happened to him. Nobody knows where he is, what he's doing. We can't find him. So Brian and I said, wow, this could be a story. So we came back to Michigan and we found Pinky. He was a retired police officer living in Warren. And he'd been a police officer for almost 30 years. And almost the entire time he was a cop, all the guys he was riding with never knew that the guy who was in the car next to him was the greatest youth baseball player of all time. So we did that documentary. We loved doing that story. That it got on television. It was on ABC. It was on Fox Sports Detroit. A lot of times it was on the MLB network, and that got us an Emmy nomination. And then our second Emmy nomination came for a film that we did called Black and Blue. That was about an incident that happened at the University of Michigan in 1934, where the football team was supposed to play against a team from Georgia Tech. that year. And back then, teams from the South would refuse to play against teams from the North if they had an African American on the team. Well, Michigan's best player was a guy named Willis Ward, who was an African American, whose best friend was Gerald Ford, the future president of the United States. And so Michigan, they capitulated to Georgia Tech's racist demands, and they agreed to bench Willis Ward for the game. It's an incredible story with so many different layers. But we did that story. That one also got on TV, and that one also got us an Emmy nomination.
That's phenomenal. But I've been following you guys for as many years, and you guys talk about this stuff, and it's just fascinating. And it goes back to storytelling. And I'm listening to Buddy. I'm listening to you talk, and I'm saying to myself, that's your superpower, is storytelling. For Buddy.
Well, it's not working out or fixing art. So if you have a superpower, then hopefully it is storytelling. One of the things that Brian and I have always tried to do, and it was true in your story as well, is that we try to find these stories that have either been lost to history or that people just don't know about.
Right. We
don't like taking something like Ken Burns just did a documentary on Ernest Hemingway. Everybody's heard of Ernest Hemingway. They all know about that. We prefer to find these stories, these forgotten heroes, forgotten stories like yours, which were things that nobody really knows about or understands. So we like bringing those kinds of stories to life, and something with kind of an educational component on them too.
One of the most nerve-wracking movies I ever did, and it was short, but I was asked by the Polish Sports Hall of Fame to do a short documentary on Stan Musial, because Stan Musial was their first inductee. And like an idiot, I said yes. And you don't want to get into deep waters with baseball historians or Stan Musial historians. I did okay with it, but that was gripping because I thought everybody's written everything about this guy. I can only screw it up. It's much more fun to go, turn over the rock and go, wow, look at this. And then you can tell it on your own terms. You don't have armchair experts or University of Facebook graduates, calling you out on your facts.
And each of us now, we have hundreds of stories in our head that we want to tell in documentaries that are the same sort of thing. They're these great untold stories. We go, oh, we got to do that. We got to do that.
Well, a lot of that stuff, like you said, with my documentary, you didn't have any real background information. You basically learned all of that from us. The difference is all of these other stories, documentaries that you're producing, you can research the information, and both of you guys grasp that information, and then you're able to grasp it, and then you can start developing this whole storyline. I think that's very, very, very impressive to be able to do that. And for Brian, what do you think your main superpower is? I mean, Brian's on the writing side. Would you say more on the video or on the education or?
I'm not sure about that. Buddy says I do sad video clips very well. I think I'm a decent presenter of our films in front of groups. I'm not sure if that's a superpower or not, but the communications part of that for me is to tell the story that Bud and I told on film in front of a group to put it into context. I think I'm decent at that.
I think Brian's superpower is exactly that. It's educating people about when we do a film on something. He has this magical ability to take it to any audience and to connect with them and let them know this is what this story is really about. And he's so much better at that than I am. I think I'm decent at getting the story out there, but then Brian can connect with an audience. And he's traveled all over the country presenting the films that we've done and, connecting with those kinds of audiences. So
and that's been a gift. That's been an absolute gift for me for meeting all those people. If there's anybody out there that wants to do this kind of thing, one of the best things is meeting the people that you show it to and have their eyes open up and go, wow, that happened. That guy is around. Wow. And you know him. And that's a lot of fun. It's conversations afterwards and the, ancillary stories that come around it. That's great. I wish I would have done this in my 20s, but I started when we were about 50, something like that.
Yeah, 49.
Yeah.
$49.50. And Brian talks about this a lot too. It is so much easier now to be able to do what we're doing than it would have been 20, 30, or 50 years ago when we were little kids. Brian and I both made movies when we were kids, and we had to shoot them with a Super 8 movie camera. And the whole process took, like it took a month to shoot 3 minutes of film and then edit it together. And it was expensive. We didn't have any money when we were little kids.
$14, and we just weren't. $14 was really hard to come by for us in the early 1970s, and it was $3.50 to buy the film and the rest to develop it, and it was it was expensive, and then you just got 3 minutes back that you couldn't see until you got it back, and then you'd punch each other in the arm because somebody got in the way or the lighting wasn't right, and you had to do it again. It was impossible. But now we have cell phones, and cell phones shoot things over and over and over again. And I did a film a couple of years ago, came out in 2017, called Where the Brave Dare to Tread, the Bob Arvin story about a guy at West Point. And I don't know if Buddy and I were somewhere along the line, I was challenged to see if I could do a whole movie with an iPhone then. Cool. And so I did. I shot the whole thing on an iPhone with the exception of the drone shot that Buddy shot for me at the very beginning of the film. The rest of it in the last credit of the film says shot entirely on an iPhone. And wherever I've shown that movie, when the credits roll, that gets the biggest, whoa, you did that. And I think that's going to be a lot less common, that kind of reaction. But back then, in fact, it was at West Point at the Omar Bradley Ballroom, and there were generals in the front row that just went, really? You shot that on your iPhone? And I just held it up and said, yep, this one. And so the point is it's much easier to do now and a lot less expensive. And the quality is a lot better. Our Super 8 films are horrible because you had to light them, and it was horrible. And we didn't even we weren't able to have sound, until 1970. What, 5, Bud, 6 or something? Yeah. We weren't very good at that. So,
and so because like Brian said, with this here, you can make an entire documentary. You can research it, shoot it, write it, edit it. You can do everything right on that. Yep. And so when you take the technology out of it and you take the cost out of it, then your entire focus can just be on the story, finding the story and telling the story on it. So anytime Brian and I ever talk to, especially kids, high school kids we say that Brian's an evangelist about it. He says, you need to be out there doing films. You need to be making movies. I made movies when I was a kid. You need to make movies, all of you right now. You have in your pocket what it takes to make a movie right now. So go do it.
Yeah. I cringe when I see 8-second TikToks of a dance and I go, man, if we'd have had the ability to shoot something like that with sound, and it's not just shooting it, like Buddy said, you can research it, shoot it, edit it, everything there. But you also, if it's good enough, if it's a good enough film, the mechanism is there for you to shoot a movie, release it, and have it go worldwide the same day. It's unheard of. Back in our day, it was a Super 8 movie. You'd never get it on TV. It wasn't broadcast quality. And now you see it with viral videos that are horrible. I'd like to see better storytelling, especially with kids, because I think kids have really cool things to say.
I love the explanation of the journey of how we were in the beginning with the film and sound. So what you're talking about now, I love how you're like, yeah, go for it, do it on your phone, because it's not that it's easier. It's that you wanna allow these other individuals to have the opportunity to go ahead and produce their own film, and that's coming from the education aspect of you guys. Because I think too many people focus on it goes both ways. Certain types of people focus on the quality, making sure everything is perfect, and then you spend all this money, and then you come to find out, well, somebody just did this whole thing on the phone, and they did it at 1/15 of the cost of what it might be for an actual film. And you just never know nowadays what it's actually going to take, especially with social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and all of it. And what I've been learning, especially with podcasting, which is basically another form of radio, talk shows and whatnot, everybody has an opportunity to get out there and be themselves and share their stories and just be as authentic as possible. I think that's the beauty of what we're seeing nowadays with the new technology versus 50 years ago.
Totally agree.
And people are starved for content, for this sort of information and everything like that. People are so connected now because of their phones and computers and streaming devices on their TVs and all that. They are dying to see great stories out there. So it's never been a better time to be a storyteller, to be a documentary storyteller or a podcaster. Because there's so many people out there that are just starved for this kind of content.
Yeah. I was at the Apple store in Novi, which I think is near you in Michigan. And I met a young kid working there. He had the Apple shirt on, and he was helping me put a screen protector on my iPhone. And we started to talk about what I did. And he saw on the business account who I was, and they went, he said, yeah, I want to be a filmmaker someday. Well, what should I do? Should I go to LA? And I said, no, when you wake up tomorrow, make a movie. And he laughed, and I said, no, just seriously, make a movie. And then by 4 o'clock, if somebody asks you what you do, you tell them I'm a filmmaker and I work at Apple. And the same goes with podcasting. People go, I really want to do a podcast. How should I do that? Well, just go do one. There's a lot of, I think it happens with novelists too. It's, I'm going to write that novel someday. Well, just go write it. Then the next day, if somebody asks you what you're doing, say, I'm a novelist. I'm working on my next piece. There's a lot of psychological barrier for people to not do something. And maybe it's just because as Buddy and I get older, we think, there's really no time like the present. So just go do it. So I told that to the Apple guy. He just went, really? And I said, yeah. Why is that not true? Just shoot your movie tomorrow. Even if you get one scene done, if somebody asks you, hey, what do you do? It doesn't know you. Say, I'm a filmmaker and I work at Apple to try to, support my film business. Right away. Bang. There's not very many times you can do that in life. You can do it now. So
Brian does this wonderful series of videos called Guess What I Found that are the concept is just so simple and brilliant. He will just take his phone and drive out somewhere and find some interesting historic site. Like one of them is the place where Henry Ford is buried. You would think Henry Ford has this enormous, elaborate grave, but he doesn't. He's buried next to this church in this tiny little grave thing. So Brian did a video where the entire thing was him basically standing next to Henry Ford's grave, which is right across the street from an old gas station, and basically telling that story. And it took him, 10 minutes to film that whole thing. It took him probably another 5 minutes in the car to edit it, and he put it out on YouTube. So now we have this interesting, fascinating story about where Henry Ford is buried. And it took Brian, maybe half an hour of his time to be able to do that.
And I'm not boasting on that. The idea was I want to come up with a rule on the Guess What I Found series. And I think I did about 15 of them, and they're online. Is you had to shoot it. You had to shoot it, edit it, and upload it all within a half an hour. You couldn't go weird with posts. So the idea is to try to go out and find something that one of them I did was in Dearborn. They were all kind of local for a while. But there's a place in Dearborn where two roads cross and an X across the giant city block. It's a neighborhood block. And it doesn't make any sense. But I knew that road, that those two X's were long before they were a neighborhood. It was a landing strip for Ford Motor Company. And planes would fly there and they would land there. But if you look at it, it doesn't make any more sense unless you get to at the intersection of those two streets and you look down both sides, like, this is the oddest neighborhood I've ever seen. Well, it was built that way. And in fact, Henry Ford built the neighborhood surrounding it and the houses face backwards toward it. So you would have a flivver, a Model T plane to put in the garage and take out and then take off on that airstrip. Now it's just a neighborhood, but and so it's little things like that. And so when you see it, put up a tripod, shoot it, tell them what it is quickly, and then get it up online. It's fun. And if you do it just as an exercise, it's a lot of fun. An exercise in filmmaking. It's fun.
I love that. I love the way you guys are thinking, because you're finding these things and you're just making light of it. At the same time, you're educating me, educating everybody else on something so unique. And I think that's what makes you guys unique, is that they are right there alone, because not everyone does that. And that's what attracts different people to you. And like I said before, every single group of people have their own story, different stories to tell. And that's pretty much what you guys do. And you guys do a phenomenal job. And
thank you.
What I wanted to ask you guys about, I believe, Buddy, you solved a mystery very recently. And I believe it's called the Torch Murders. And it's something you're working on. And talk about bringing that to the screen, right?
Yeah, Brian's actually doing the Torch Murders one, which is a different story. The one that I found out, my mom's cousin, her first cousin, was a famous Hollywood actress named Jenny Maxwell, who was murdered back in 1981. And the family always thought the murder was never solved. But 2 years ago, I went out to Los Angeles and I found the police officer who actually solved the case back in 1981, and then wrote a book about it, about her life, the life of this actress named Jenny Maxwell, who was really famous in the early 60s. My mom's cousin. So I wrote a book, first book I've ever written. I wrote a book about her story, and then how the murder was solved, but no one ever knew it after that. So that's been a really interesting process. And then Brian is working on a project called the Torch Murders that happened in Ypsilanti.
That's right.
Yeah. What about the Touch Murders? What was it about that story that?
It happened in Ypsilanti. It's one of those things too, where if you ask 100 people in Ypsilanti what were the Torch Murders about, and actually using just that term, they wouldn't know what it was. But in 1931, 4 teenagers were killed in the summer, and their bodies were burned in their car. And the story went nationwide. And then it went worldwide all within a couple of days. And the whole crux of the story isn't the murder. The murder is awful, and doesn't really have an upside. But what was really interesting about it is the murder happened on a Tuesday morning at 2 a.m. And by Thursday night, all 3 murderers of the 4 teenagers were on their way to Jackson Prison serving 4 consecutive life terms. So it took authorities about 2 days, 72 hours between murder and having the jail slammed behind them in swift justice that you just don't see anymore. And it involves mobs of 10,000 people in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor trying to kill the suspects. It involves Ford Motor Company and Harry Bennett, who was Henry Ford's chief of security. It has all these elements of, an incredible cops and robbers story that happens so fast. And then following those murderers, the 3 murderers, and what happens to them. 2 of them end up dying, and one ends up walking away in the late 60s on his own. And we follow that story to its end. So it's called the Torch Murders, and it was referred to as the Torch Murders from Australia to the London Times to New York Times to everything from the small college town of Ypsilanti in 1931.
Most of your stories revolve around Michigan history.
Yeah. What you know, right? What you know, right?
And we're branching out into different areas. We started in sports documentaries. We did your film, and now we're in true crime.
Yeah,
so we're hitting all the genres now.
That's right.
Well, that's the thing, though. You guys have done a wonderful job of pivoting, because I could be wrong, but I think to be a good filmmaker, it's not just about being involved in one specific sport. Not like Ken Burns. Ken Burns does all the sports stuff. Now, I really love the original baseball. This is baseball or something. Back in the 90s, I think he did.
It was just baseball. That was really good. I didn't like how he treated Ty Cobb, but that film was amazing.
Yep, it was. Yeah. I mean, I love the baseball stuff, so I always appreciate those types of stories. So let me ask you this, real quick. What would you give for Buddy, you being a journalist, you being in that field? What advice would you give upcoming journalists nowadays to help them excel in their career?
That is a great question, Jordan. The number one thing that I would tell journalists is that there's always going to be a market out there for people that can tell stories. I don't know if newspapers are always going to exist, though. So the best thing that you can do if you're a journalist is learn to become a good storyteller, and then learn to tell your stories in different platforms, video, podcasts, writing as well. But don't limit yourself to just saying, I'm going to be a newspaper writer or I'm going to be a print journalist, because that's not going to cut it anymore. But the number one thing you have to do is you have to learn how to become a good storyteller.
I like that. Wonderful. Brian, what about you in terms of education, film? What advice would you give new people in the industry?
to trust your gut. And what I mean by that is take a look at what you're watching and what you're reading and why it appeals to you. And then make it incumbent upon yourself to find a younger person or anybody to tell that story to, even if you're not, even if you can't tell the story quite right. At least see if you can make them excited about it. And I've learned that from being on the road. If you can make a group of people excited about something before they see it, and then even after they see it, then you've done something. And then I have another bit of advice. I want to make sure it gets out on this. This is a new one of mine. As Buddy and I have done these films, every single time, there's been somebody who's passed away a few years before that we missed. And you can always chase your tail. With the film Black and Blue, had we done that in the early 80s, we could have had Gerald Ford and Willis Ward in the story. If we'd have done it in 2004, we could have had Gerald Ford in the story. You can never second guess who's going to pass away. But my point is this. Older people, value older people, because they're walking around and they're if you want to talk about Emmy nominations and Oscars, those people are walking Oscars and they're walking Emmy nominations. If you just sit down and watch them. I was at Hillsdale College with Buddy last night. Buddy does a documentary film class. He's a professor at Hillsdale. And they told a story about a football team in 1950s. And the guy was there. One of the guys that played on the team was there. And I was so heartwarming because they got him. Had they made that 10 years from now, you don't know if that guy's there. So pay attention to older folks. Don't walk by them and think that guy got in my way, or, man, they're not relevant. They are. Stop and talk to older people, because they'll tell you stories that you could make into amazing books, films, podcasts, anything else. Just listen to people. You can get the younger people, you can get them later, but the old folks, stop and talk to them.
Yep, I like that. What you said there, I think it's dynamite. And to sum everything up, basically, what we're talking about here generally is the entrepreneurial spirit that you guys had as kids, beginning with the films and all of that, and learning how to solve problems, because you didn't know how to do these things, different films and editing and sound and all that, and then the whole transition of the writing and the journaling and podcasting, video, all of it is one heck of a journey. And I really hope you guys continue this journey, and I look forward to following this journey. And I love the fact that you guys always have something different going on, and that's what makes you guys trying something different. I think that's what people need to understand. People who are listening and watching, do not be afraid to try something different, to try something new. You never know where they're going to end up.
Exactly. And we have failed in so many things that we've films that we've done. And the only way you're going to make a great film is if you make some bad ones too. So, you can't be, you are so right, Jordan. You cannot be afraid to fail, and you just got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple more quick questions. My last two questions are, we'll start with Buddy. What do you do to recalibrate? Your mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. What do you do to kind of ground yourself?
Okay, this is I do like to go to the gym, but the thing that really helps me wind down at the end of the night is it's going to sound like the nerdiest thing ever, but I go on this website, newspapers.com, and I look up old newspapers. I'll go back into the 20s or 30s or in the 1800s and spend hours just looking up old stories in newspapers, and that calms my mind down. It gets me thinking about, I want to do a film on that too. But that's really my relaxation time is history, looking up old historic things, but particularly newspapers. And the thing I like about newspapers is when you read an old paper, you are reading history as it was written.
Yes.
With no filter through history, with no filter through the ages. You're reading it as it was written, and it's just really cool for me to do that.
And I really appreciate that. It makes me think about it. Like, you are literally reading what actually happened. You don't have all of the bias and all the things we have nowadays. It's literally storytelling at that time, literally exactly as it is. And now everything's all who knows what.
Right.
Brian, what about you?
About the same thing. I like to read a lot of documentary or a lot of biographies. And then to really wind down, I get away from my screens because I do a lot of editing and a lot of stuff online. I produce a couple podcasts and I do a lot of stuff with electronic just content. So I like to get in my car and drive as far away as I can. And it's easier said than done. You can go north. I go north. I'm in Michigan. So I go north into the Thumb area and I find small towns to walk around. And then I've got one that's as nerdy as Bud's, but probably weirder, is I like to walk through cemeteries. And I get steps in walking through cemeteries, but I have found so many interesting things and you look at the names and you think, what's that story? And you look at something that might be odd and like what's that? Right. Or wow, that guy's here. And here's a great point with that. I was in Harbor Beach, which is on the coast of the Thumb, north of Port Huron. And I was walking through this old cemetery and I came upon what has got to be the most fascinating and fascinating is the wrong word, the most impressive tombstone I have ever seen. And it was on the ground and it said this. It said, I won't tell you the name until afterwards. It said, Attorney General, Mayor of Detroit, Senator or U.S. Senator, President of the Philippines, Supreme Court Justice. And that was Frank Murphy. And Frank Murphy is somebody that I'm kicking around to do a documentary on because I cannot believe nobody's done anything on this guy. And he died young. And he did everything. That guy did everything. And that tombstone, I just stopped and went, my God, what an accomplished guy. That happened just from a remote walk in a cemetery. And I think I did a mini doc on that too, because I was just stunned. So I had to set up my tripod and tell the story.
That is phenomenal. Did you plan that or just happen to be?
It's twisted. The first time I saw the tombstone, I didn't film it. The first time I saw the tombstone, I was just amazed, and I had to go find out everything I could about Frank Murphy. I knew of him, but I didn't realize he had done all that. And then I went back and did that one. Yeah,
that's fascinating. And my last question, while I'm on you, Brian, what brings you joy?
My wife and my son. My son's in medical school. It was great. I miss him, but he's out crushing the world. And my wife, she's great. So family does all of that. So
wonderful. How about you, Buddy?
I'd say my family, not Brian's. I like his family too. But I love spending time with my family. I have my wife and 4 kids. I love spending time with them, and watching documentaries brings me joy too. Seeing stories, seeing other people tell stories. I love that too.
Yeah, I agree.
The guys chose the right industries, not just multiple.
That's right.
So very quickly, for the viewers who are watching, want to get a hold of Brian, Ian, and Buddy, please tell us what's the best way to get a hold of you guys to take a look and see what you guys do.
I think if you just go to Stunt3 and I see it on the Chiron underneath there. So stunt3.com has contact information for the both of us. So
that's the best place. Yep.
That's how you'll find us.
Wonderful. Listen, it's been an absolute blast. We've been talking for almost 45 minutes. I didn't even realize it was and we could keep going forever, but we all have things to do.
We have stories to tell. Yes.
Stories to tell. That's right.
Wait, hang on 1 second. When I sign off, we can talk for a second afterwards, and we're good. Thank you for listening. Please check out my website for more great content at jordan11.com.